Gives me great pleasure to introduce today's distinguished speaker, Dr. Ronjon.
It's an honor to be here and speak to parents of Stanford students. I'm presuming current students, but maybe old students as well. And I first got to know Susan, I think a few years ago, in a course that I teach at Stanford, actually, which anyone can take. It starts next week. I'll flash up the details of that. And hopefully Susan was paying attention because we were talking about GPT 4 years ago. So it's actually not 6 months old. It's actually the concept's been out there, and hopefully you heard it from me first. Maybe I'll tell you a few first things today as well. I usually like to say something where someone said, "Oh, I heard it here first." So who am I? My name's Ronjon Nag. Thank you, Pradeep, for that nice, graceful introduction. I've done lots of companies. I've really got 3 personas. Yes, I'm an inventor. Done a lot of work in the mobile space. These days, looking at the intersection of mathematics and medicine. I'm an investor. I have my own venture capital firm and actually teach healthcare venture capital at Stanford. Brings me along to my teaching activities. I'm a teacher in the medical school and involved in a number of projects, including the boundaries of humanity, which is what happens to humans as we sort of integrate AI and we start to do gene editing. Could we actually be changing the species? There'll be a conference on that late October, which some of you might be interested in. That's accessible to everyone. Lots and lots of companies. As I said, these days I'm looking really at biology, engineering, looking at hard problems. The body's a very complex system. How can we actually use some of the tools that we have available now to actually turn biology into an engineering subject? And this is about entrepreneurship in AI. So many opportunities, white space opportunities in the medical area that is possible. And I'm voting with my feet. So one of the things on entrepreneurship, I can give advice and tell you where the puck's going to be. But maybe you should look at what I'm actually doing myself with voting with my feet and my time and my dollars and my teaching activities. Firmly believe there's this intersection of machine learning and medicine that we can attack. Difficult problem, though. There's some courses. I teach your students a number of courses. These are the code names. If you are interested, do you think you want to tell your child courses we're teaching? Right now, we're teaching healthcare venture capital with Professor Michael Snyder in the genetics department. How do you actually translate ideas from science to actually being usable by real people? It's a long journey in the case of drugs, a little bit short in the case of diagnostics and medical devices, not much shorter. But how can you have an impact on the world? I also teach longevity science and AI, genes and ethics. These are all for your students that you can take, that your students can take, your children can take. But there's a couple of courses that anybody can take. So the course that Susan took is now being renamed a Crash Course in AI. It starts next week and it's online, so you can take it from anywhere, 7 p.m. West Coast time. And there's also another course at the beginning of November that will be taught, Living Long, Living Well, the Science of Aging. And so if anyone's interested, you take a snapshot of this code or just go to the Continuing Studies catalog and search for them. And those 2 courses anyone can take. Like Stanford's cheapest AI course. I think it's $400, something of that nature. If you're interested in the Stanford courses, you can't take those, unfortunately. But you can see the student papers. Maybe some of your children have actually written papers. There's about 100 papers in this series, where each of these students have to write a paper at the end of the topic. If you do actually want to take a course, one of these courses at Stanford, there's this program at Stanford that I took in 2016. It's called the Distinguished Careers Institute. And this is a program where you can come back to university It's usually for people with a 30-year plus career, so usually age 50 to 70. And you just spend a year at Stanford. And if you're lucky enough, or maybe your child will think unlucky enough, so you'll be at the same time as your child is there, and you just take the courses with the 20-year-olds, exactly the same courses, but you're lucky that you don't actually have to do the exams, so you can actually take more risks. So I learned all my biology in that program, all my medical. I took all the med school classes, and I took all the bioinformatics classes, and took it hook, line, and sinker. So now a professor, but the bottom of the academic totem pole, just an adjunct professor in the Department of Genetics. So that might be interesting for some of you. Okay, been inventing for 40 years, being an entrepreneur, completely unemployable. First invention as part of a team, of course. All these are team efforts. Sometimes I'm the figurehead, sometimes I'm not. Certainly the first laptop with speech recognition was a company called Apricot. I was just a young engineer at the time, but certainly built on activities, and came to Stanford University about 30 years ago as a postdoc and started working on handwriting recognition. We'll talk about those journeys. But done a number of things. I've worked on a throwable camera that you can throw, a device that can measure blood pressure on a wearable. And these days I'm a venture capitalist as well. But where did I get my first inspiration for? And this is quite important, where your children are inspired by, certainly they're inspired by teachers, and certainly their environment, things they see in the media. I once taught a course, The Science of Science Fiction. Which comes first, science or science fiction? And Star Trek was the series that I was brought up with. And of course, is which version of Star Trek? When I talk to your children, I suddenly realize they're thinking about the movie and I'm thinking about the TV series. And most of the inventions, I would say most, many of the inventions in Star Trek have actually happened. In, the communicator, even the tricorder. We've got now sensors that are non-invasive, can tell us what's wrong with us. One of the things that hasn't happened yet is Android, which was a robot that was forever trying to figure out how he could be human. It's an age-old trope that dates from Pinocchio days. But it was always wondering, how could I be human? What does it take to be human? And could AI become sentient? He was always wondering what it would take to be that. We haven't really got quite there yet. And by the way, yes, if you have comments or questions, feel free to put them in the chat. From time to time, I'll just have a quick look at the chat, or Pradeep will look through and see and try and maybe group those questions. So you might agree with me as well or disagree with me. Go ahead and put things on if you watch Star Trek. This is my first project back at Birmingham University, doing speech recognition for, in those days, telephone digits. And we can look at the processing power here: 8 bits, 1 megahertz, not 1 gigahertz, and 8 kilobytes, not megabytes, not gigabytes, kilobytes of memory. And it's all, we had to sort of write in assembly language. For those of you who know what that is, it's a very low level language. And that was my first project. And this was Apricot. We managed to sort of ram it into a laptop of the day. And it was, it could only recognize 64 words at a time. Now you could have groups of 64 words plugged together. If you added them all together, you get 4,000 words, but only 64 words at a time. And only, you have to have a pause in between each word. So that was one of the first examples of speech recognition in a shipping machine. Came to Stanford after Birmingham, went to Cambridge, did my PhD in speech recognition, machine learning, neural networks, and came to Stanford in 1991 and started working on cursive handwriting recognition. This is where the letters are joined up, so you don't know where one letter begins and one letter ends. Quite a difficult problem. Even today is a difficult problem. We were able to get it on an 8-bit processor and then rammed it into first of all a laptop, and then finally into a phone. This is where, after coming to Stanford, in the not the engineering department, not the computer science department, but actually the psychology department, working on these computational neural networks, got on the cover of Fortune. So you too, your children too, can graduate and get on the cover of Fortune within 15 months of being at Stanford. So that was my experience. I thought that was my experience in Silicon Valley. This is there's a classic Silicon Valley story. Two guys in Palo Alto, beavering away. I think at our peak we were 3 people, and then got on the cover of Fortune magazine. And then 3 months later, Motorola buys the company, and they wanted to figure out how to get input systems into phones. They could see even in '93 that phones would become more intelligent, and how are we going to get text into the machine? And the first thing they told me to do was, we want you to invent Chinese handwriting recognition, because we've just invented texting and we don't know how to get the characters into the phone. And there are 20,000 Chinese characters that you have to deal with. And I said, I don't speak, read, or write Chinese. And they've said, we don't care, go and invent it anyway. So fortunately, I speak mathematics, and we were able to do that. So my specialism, and this is probably one, again, thinking about entrepreneurship, what are themes, is you take a specialism from one area and take it to another area. So my specialism was actually in speech recognition, took it to handwriting recognition, English handwriting, and take it to Chinese. And then we take it to a third company, which was, we invented the mobile app store, which was trying to crowdsource intelligence. Instead of building every single feature, invented the mobile app store in 1999. Unfortunately, there were no phones that could run apps. That was my only problem. But again, trying to be early instead of being late, I think that's a little bit better, but you have to catch the timing. I tend to be a bit early. If you're lucky enough to catch the timing, you can actually make a sort of a bigger splash. But I get bragging points, at least. I get bragging points, and we did fine. That company was bought by BlackBerry, the App Store company. And then a third company went back to speech recognition, and was more the investor, more the advisor in this company. I was trying to make the dialogue systems better on your phone, and so that was acquired by Apple. So one to Motorola, one to BlackBerry, one to Apple. The sort of biggest brand name companies in each time horizon for mobiles. But really, we'd start to looking at, what is intelligence? How do we develop AI? These are all vertical problems that we looked at: speech recognition, handwriting recognition. But what do humans think intelligence is? So I asked my students, what is intelligence? And they come out with this kind of word map: and reasoning, and decision making, and learning, comprehension, understanding, wisdom, these kinds of things. And then most AI systems are not that. They're very vertical problems. The fingerprint recognition, stock market prediction, very, very vertical problems. Even with GPT, which I'll talk about, which is more language, it's actually still relatively narrow to what us humans can do with hands and feet, where we can touch and smell, and we have emotions. And so what is AI? First of all, let's get the definition out there, because there's all these terms and people say that's not AI, that's machine learning. So AI, the original definition, relates to human-like intelligence, performance, thinking like a human does, doing what a human does. And so most AI out there is not, well, all AI is not at that level yet. We think it is. When Siri came out, people were amazed. Oh, it's incredible. But pretty shortly, people get jaded. GPT's come out. Wow, it's amazing. But people are now beginning to detect, that's generated by GPT. They can tell. Machine learning is a term that's bandied about. It usually talks about numerical recipes. It's spelled random for it's supposed to be random for us. Numerical recipes that can actually do pattern recognition. And so we have this term called generalized AI, or strong AI, which actually means close to the original definition of AI. And they have weak AI, which is really pretty much everything that's out there. And then machine learning technically is numerical recipes. But you'll find in the literature, both in the academic literature and in the mainstream, it's not just the lay literature, all these terms are used interchangeably. And so it's best not to get too hung up about them. AI is now really defined by the way it is used, and is used to cover all of these things. Anything with a formula now is sort of covered by the definition of AI because of its use, not by its real definition. And then GoFi, good old-fashioned artificial intelligence, that refers to symbolic processing, rules-based systems, and where someone would sit someone down and say, well, why do you think this person's got diabetes? And they'd write down all the rules, and the job was how to get those rules into a machine. The problem is there's so many rules. Modern AI uses what we call neural networks and takes statistical models of what the data is. And now today's disciplines, and this is why anybody in any subject can really now work in AI, is an interdisciplinary process. Certainly in the computer science department, engineering department, but now you're seeing certainly in psychology, we did a lot of work there. But pretty much every department at Stanford is thinking about AI, the biologists, even English literature. And have a machine read Shakespeare instead of reading yourself. It's interdisciplinary. It's now being made accessible. And so we're at peak hype. Products are generated in this sort of what we call a hype cycle invented by Gartner, where ideas come about at the beginning where just a few people sort of know about it and start working about it. And then people say, oh, this thing actually kind of works. Let's start using it on different things. These are all kinds of different technologies and sciences. And then people get really excited. This can make toast. This can do everything. So generative AI, Gen AI, is right at the top. That covers things like Chat GPT, right at the top. People think it can do everything. And then we're just beginning now, actually. People say, well, actually, no, I can tell this is GPT generated. And people then get to, we can't do everything. And then we see these autonomous vehicles, which are just coming out of a slump. So where are these self-driving cars if they're supposed to exist? But you're seeing driving assistance systems popping up, and then this slope of enlightenment where people start think, oh, actually it is useful. And then finally it actually becomes useful. So you see speech recognition now everywhere, and it becomes useful. You dial in and so it becomes this product. So there's this cycle thing. So you can argue whether the current cycle, GPT, this normally takes many, many years, has this entire cycle gone through in about 6 months for GPT. Certainly it's becoming useful for some people, but you're also seeing some dynamics. So as an entrepreneur, you've got to spot the timing and spot when it's ready, and then go where the puck's going to be, not where it is now. Where it is now is very, very crowded. So you've got to go where it's going to be. So A16Z, famous venture firm here, they say there's about 100 categories, 2 or 3 categories are taken out. 98 categories are still up for grabs, 98 applications. Maybe in your own industries, you can think about, people where some of these techniques can be used, but they're not currently be used. As I said, I've been working in it for 40 years, since 1983, and I thought when I entered it, I was late. So your students or you might think you're late coming into it. We're not late. We're still at the beginning. And you can date it back to 1956 when the first term was coined, AI, or even 1936, Alan Turing. So the concept takes many, many years. So what are neural networks? This is what basically modern AI is based on, inspired by the brain. This is a neuron, a cartoon of a neuron. We have about 90 billion neurons in our brain. Each neuron is connected to other neurons. So inputs come from other neurons. If the inputs are big enough, it's sent on to hundreds or thousands of other neurons. And so that's how we represent it computationally. We have a computational node. We have inputs, and inputs could be sounds or pixels or stock market prices, and we multiply them by weights and we add them up. And then if they're big enough, they're sent on. And this concept is decades old. This is an article from the New York Times where they said they created 4 neurons, and they thought the computer would be able to walk, talk, see, write, reproduce itself, and be conscious within 5 years of 1958. So this is a classic recurring theme. Every time it's 5 years, we're going to have a conscious system in a machine. Is it different this time? And we simplify the whole thing compared to a real brain. We arrange these things, these little individual nodes in layers, and we have to compute those weights, where we have to weight each of these inputs, and they weight the follow-on inputs. And the trick is we have to, the knowledge is really in the connections and the weights. And I came to Stanford to work with this person, David Rummelhart. Unfortunately, he passed away about 12, 13 years ago, wrote some famous books to how to compute those weights. So your students are with professors and teachers who are at the cutting edge of their fields, and it might be something that's going to be used 10 years from now, but not being particularly active at the time. And is trying to actually, so that's being able to sort of pick up those things. Universities are great places. There's just ideas lying on the floor. If you want to be an entrepreneur, you just have to pick them up, decide if that's idea you want to pursue. It might take 10 years. It better be an idea that you like to do, and then run with it. Generative AI, what does that mean? The first generative AI systems were really looking at pictures, and you'd have two AI systems, one neural network looking at a training set of, in this case, can we actually create handwritten characters? And let's look at a candidate set of characters, and let's just put noise in, rubbish in, and see whether this network can produce a character. At the beginning, it just presents rubbish, and the second network said, well, this is obviously not a character, go away, try again. It keeps trying again. Eventually it can't tell the difference. This network on the right just can't tell the difference. So, oh yeah, well, actually that's a real handwritten character. So if you apply this to pictures, this is my student Robbie, who trained it on about 5 years ago, actually, on landscape paintings, 14,000 landscape paintings, and they're actually able to create paintings out of it. And of course, being the entrepreneur he was, he sold these paintings to Bloomberg for $2,000 each, and they went on the cover of Bloomberg. He thought it was being clever. Then the French company took his code and then created a painting, and that was sold for $460,000 at Christie's. And then there was debate. Well, who owned the art? Was it the French company who ran the code? Was it Robbie who created the code? Was it the underlying artists, Renoir, Gauguin, who was part of the training set? So there's all this debate about who was there. So the idea, you can duplicate almost anything. We're seeing that now. You can generate fake news, generate books. So ChatGPT, you all want to know what that is. I'm sure you've all used it. You can go and set up an account for free. What is that? You can actually ask questions, ask it to summarize things. It can generate hallucinations that are completely the wrong answers. But basically, at the simplest level, it's just predicting words. It's just mathematics. You can look at your search engine and it will predict the next word. And we'll have probability in the way it does it, probabilities of what word sequence could exist. Look, predicting for the next couple of words from the previous two words. What ChatGPT does, and this, I think I showed this slide maybe when Susan was in the class, it's 2019. OpenAI came up with this system, and at first they said it's so dangerous they're not going to actually release it. Then 3 weeks later they released it, so maybe a PR thing, and because it was too dangerous for the public to use. And what's interesting about these, they use something called transformer networks. Instead of looking just the last couple of words, it's looking at the last 100 or thousands of words to create context. And as a result, those weights, as you start to have more and more units, the number of parameters explodes. So the earliest versions had 1.1 billion parameters. ChatGPT 3, 175 billion parameters. ChatGPT 4 looks like it's 1.7 billion, 1.7 trillion parameters that are needed to create and solve the problems. And the more parameters you have, the more things you can do. It starts with some sort of language prediction, but then it starts to do some reasoning. But remember, it's not actually understanding like we are. It's just doing mathematics. It's just doing predictions. You can debate whether we are actually just doing the same thing. We're just doing mathematics in our head, and say, well, really, it's the same thing. And is it on its way to sentience? But from a engineering point of view, it's doing mathematics. Here are examples of just the old version. This is like 3-4 years old of Shakespeare. Not too bad as it's coming out. Maybe you can rewrite famous people who have died, get some new treatments, and it's definitely impressive. You can pass exams. You know, all that trouble your students had to do to get through their APs. A machine can do a pretty good job, and but again, it's not understanding. We can actually predict the consequences of our actions many steps ahead. And there'll be a number of papers now coming out. You know, this is sort of the unrealistic expectations part of that curve, of the hype curve. People are now coming out saying, well, actually, there are quite a lot of limitations that in these systems compared to what us humans can do. But it works quite well. You know, you can ask, say, well, provide some instructions that a doctor would give for a patient in simple language, and it gives quite well. It explains why you're doing this, why you should drink water, and then why you should take this medicine for your blood pressure. It might help your cough. But you know, and you can also ask it things. Pradeep, thank you for bringing up the Mountbatten Medal. I was lucky enough to win it, so I typed this in. Who are the most famous winners of the IAT Mountbatten Medal? We've got Tim Berners-Lee. He invented the web, and we've got Vint Cerf, father of the internet. All really famous, but I'm not on it. Maybe because I'm not famous. Okay, but so I typed this again. Unsung heroes who've won the Mountbatten Medal. Okay, we've got all these people. Ray Dolby, you know, the music, some of these other people. Chris Burton invented digital video. These are all people, maybe they should have won it. But actually, when you actually look at the real winners, none of these people, except for Tim Berners-Lee and Andy Hopper, are on the winning list. And yet they don't include me. So when you ask it for a fact, it will actually come out with the wrong answer. Why is that? Because it's collecting statistics. They probably are of the caliber that they could win it, but they're not in the list. And people would say AI will never be empathic. It'll never give me a human response. But you're seeing things where people are saying, well, actually, it's better. And people say, would rather talk to a machine than talk to a human. It's less embarrassing. And people will say, going back to entrepreneurship, there's all sorts of studies that will say 1 billion jobs are going to be lost. There's another set of studies that 1 billion jobs will be gained. What jobs would go away? You know, radiologists, you know, us computer scientists, we're always joking about radiology. If your child's going to become a doctor, that's great. But we all say, don't be a radiologist because it's going to be done by a machine. We actually had a radiologist come into the class, and they said, well, yes, we are worried about this, but you know what? 10 years time, we're going to have these tools and we're going to be superhuman. The other fields are going to look like witch doctors. And so one of the themes is if you actually use the systems, you'll be fine. So I think there is a phrase, be worried about the person who uses AI to take away a job, not AI itself taking your job. Same like lawyers, you can imagine being superhuman, doing searches. And this started like really 30 years ago. You know, even when Yahoo, Google came out, you could look up things in 2 minutes instead of going to the library for 4 hours. Whole set of jobs enabled by AI. You can be an entrepreneur now. You can get questions, creativity. You can be your sort of co-founder almost to actually help you in actually create products. So, and then there's a whole system of outsourced labs and product makers and research organizations, contract research organizations that do experiments for you. They can almost do a company from your bedroom. And so people are worried, will AI going to take over? Will robots, will we have Terminators taking over our jobs and taking over and putting us in prison? And so probably not, but because it's going to be more economics. It goes back to entrepreneurship. We're going to have to think for ourselves. We're going to have to think about where machines may have rights themselves. And we already have corporations have rights. There's sort of humanizations legal entities, maybe robots should pay taxes. Bill Gates has suggested that, if a robot's going to take your job away, maybe they should pay tax. They should be taxed as well. So why do some people think they are going to take over the world? They've got these petitions and these letters going around where people sign off. Sometimes you think maybe people in the AI feel, well, look, I'm doing something important, so now maybe you should listen to me now for once. Right? People like the accolades. They like the analogy to duplicating humanity, and so we give things personas that humans do. There's even been a robot called Sophia that's been given citizenship, and we have compared the work they do with what humans can do. So how do you do entrepreneur? How do you invest in AI? One idea is don't invest in AI, invest in the tools of AI, infrastructure. Find an application where AI can be done better than you can do by hand. So just the sheer quantity of information processing, you can find applications. 3, you can find an application where you can just do it cheaper and faster. So, human can do it, but it's expensive and it takes a lot of time. You can invest in pure play AI companies. Finding pure play companies is a little bit difficult. Most companies, even the Googles, the Microsofts, they have other things that they work on. But the main thing, and this is the main thing for your students, invest in yourself. Find out what AI can do or not do and where it can help you. Stay with the times. That's the main thing. Stay educated. There are new roles. 30 years ago, I physically had to come to Stanford and work with Professor Rummelhart and figure out what to do. And it's like a PhD plus 5-6 years before you could work in the field. Now that's not the case. In fact, you need people from interdisciplinary backgrounds to get these entire products. You need product managers, not just algorithm mathematicians. You need the softer sciences. You need infrastructure maintainers. If you want to retrain the system, one of the things that GPT is only trained up to January 22. How do you retrain it with new information? So there's going to be a lot more roles developing in this area, and there are going to be suppliers to these roles, products for these roles that will be doing it. Instead of being a PhD plus 5 years, it's going to be fresh graduates going to take on these roles, and they're going to take numerous roles as part of a team. There are other projects systems that hitherto haven't been there. A personality creator. There used to be a job at Siri for a joke writer for Siri. Product managers who understand what AI can do and can't do. If you want to enter politics, hardly any of our congressmen know anything about AI. And so yet there's no reason why you can't learn the basics. Numerous courses out there that you can take, books, media. I think that newspapers are not very good sources, actually. They're very hand-wavy. So what am I working on now? I am an entrepreneur myself, and these, by definition, this is a conflict and a declaration that I'm working on these things. First thing, I have a venture capital firm, R42. We have fellows programs, some of you that work on projects, things like holographic phone calls. We invest in AI and longevity science companies. So longevity science is one thing I'm looking at. There's 2 trends. Really, we know AI is accelerating, but it's also biotech is accelerating. The oldest ever living person got to 122. Looks like 100 is the new 80. 120 is the new 100 now. It's quite difficult to get to 120, but 100, lots of people getting to 100 now. 30,000 people enter the Boston Marathon each year. It used to be 1,000. How do we get to 150? Is that even possible in the next 20 years? So we have Ingemica, which we're trying to make a vaccine for aging, again, using computational techniques. And I'm just finishing now. We have Superbio, which is a library of AI library sciences tools, which you don't need any code. You just upload data and click train. Bounce imaging, my throwable camera, you just throw it. It's got cameras around it. It takes a live 360-degree stitched video image. It's for first responders. And then finally, if you want to talk to me, you can go here to app.mimeo.ai, and you can actually just talk to me, and I can respond. And it's trained with my writings and my essays and my PowerPoints, and you can try it. It doesn't work too badly. And so there you go. Be critical of everything you hear, giving you a one-sentence thing, what neural networks are, some job prospects. Let's have some questions and comments. Let's see what's on the chat. So we've got one question on the chat, and let's see. Great questions popping up. So why don't you go ahead, and I'll just take them in order, I guess, unless Susan wants to use and you want to use their.
Do you want me to read them out to you, or would you rather just?
No, I'll read them out.
Okay.
We'll sort of get through as many as we can. So from Heather, text generating AI creating legitimate sounding but false information, essentially. Like, that's my Batten model. Like, even visual AI, you can how do we protect ourselves? Well, I think it's going to be an extension of the internet. Often people would say, oh, don't believe anything you see on the internet or read on the internet, because it's not, you don't know what the source is, you don't know what the provenance is. This is going to be a similar aspect. You're going to still need doctors who, they may have a system that helps you, helps them answer the question, because there's a million medical articles printed every year. No one's got time to read all of them. So can you have a machine read them, but then have the doctor, the overlay go on top? There might be a resurgence. The press have had a hard time in the last 30 years, the economic model, because the internet's got information for free. But you might say, well, look, I don't believe the internet, but I do believe the New York Times. It'll be the job of the New York Times, the Guardian, to actually check and double check what things come in. So you're going to be looking at, where did this information come from? And if it's not verified, and people are starting to look at, well, if it's generated by a machine, say it's generated by a machine, that's not a legal requirement yet, but you might be able to do some things. Let's see, Anna, great question. Students starting Stanford this year, what majors would you recommend with AI and potential in mind to student interested in entrepreneurship, computer science, bioengineering, economics, and finance? Lots and lots of courses at Stanford, explore courses at Stanford.edu. I've actually, unusually compared to many of your speakers that I suspect you'll get, because I went through the Distinguished Careers Institute program, I've actually taken a lot of classes that your students have taken. So I've taken about 50 courses at Stanford University, all with varying topics. And there's numerous what do you call accelerator courses: hacking for medicine, hacking for defense. You don't necessarily have to be a computer programmer. You can be matched with people who are. These are interdisciplinary projects. There is behavioral economics class, which I quite liked. There is numerous computer science classes. Normally, these computer science classes are quite large, hundreds of people. CS221, which is, and then there's a natural language understanding class, which are accessible. SimSys 1 is the sort of a very broad computer science class, which is available to all kinds of backgrounds. And then there's sort of business classes. If you're an undergraduate, often the business school is difficult to get into. But what happens is, you've got MS&E, management science and engineering. They've almost got parallel courses to the business school, taught by different people, because we know undergraduates want to do business as well. And so you've got parallel courses, computational finance, for example, that are taken. There's biosciences course. The courses I teach, of course, healthcare venture capital, longevity venture capital. That I think there's plenty of. Those are just a few that I've written out. What are the most promising for AI extending human lifespan, improving overall well-being? Well, I'm voting with my feet on that one. It's certainly drug discovery. I'm a big believer. Right now, it takes 20 years and $1 billion to get drugs out. It's $1 billion because it includes all the failed drugs, and really it's only about 100 million. But when these big pharma goes to Congress, they say it costs us $1 billion, so we need to we need all our tax credits, and we need all our we need to charge this much for drugs. And with AI, maybe it's not, we can increase that probability. It's not 1 in 20 anymore. Maybe it's 8 in 20. And so that can cut the costs down. And what we're trying to do is, normal biotech is trying to, at Agemica, we're trying to do multiple diseases all at the same time. Normal biotech, let's attack one disease, like cancer, or even one type of cancer, pancreatic cancer, and solve that. Many of these diseases, cancer, heart disease, arthritis, dementia, are correlated with aging. So there's a theory is maybe not just correlated, maybe aging is the causal mechanism, these old cells that we create, and can we destroy the old cells? So that's what we're trying to do at Gemica, is find a senescent signature. That means an old cell signature across 80 organs, and then attack that signature. And again, using using computation, instead of doing some kind of like Star Trek kind of stuff. Instead of actually trying to do experiments, do the computational first, and then attack the problem. And that's my vision, actually. The Star Trek vision is, and he's beginning to see it almost with the protein folding area, that the computer spits out a treatment, and then you might do a trial and the trial doesn't work, but you actually believe the computer more than you do the trial. You say, oh, well, I must have done something wrong with my trial. It's like if you drop an apple 1,000 times to calculate speed of gravity, you probably won't be 9.81. And you're going to say, was Newton wrong? No, Newton is right. I've done my apple dropping experiment wrong. So we begin to see some bits of biology and protein folding. People believe the computer simulation more than they do their experiment. Right, what are the applications, intersection of AI and blockchain infrastructure? Yeah, we need more questions here as well, by the way. Otherwise, we'll drop into ChatGPT. Well, clearly, it goes back to this a question about the validity and verification of what you're seeing. AI is trained on data, and if it's trained on bad data, then it will give you the wrong results. Let me see, I've lost my chat. Where is? And if it's trained, so maybe there's a blockchain that gives you two things. One is it verifies the data that's being trained. Second, maybe you can do something called federated learning, to actually train on data, but you don't actually need to see the data directly. And so that's where we're looking at possible entries. Let's see. How is AI being used in neuroscience? So you could look at it both ways. How's neuroscience being used in AI? A lot of these things were inspired, as a little picture of a brain behind me, inspired by the brain, and we can figure out how to build new AI systems. The other topic, which we say in the HII, human-centered AI, is can we study AI systems and can we get ideas of how the brain might work? I mean, 30 years ago, having a neuroscientist and a computer scientist, even on the same stage, was like an anathema. That wouldn't really say, look, the neuroscientist said, you're obviously simplifying it. It's way too, this is not how the brain works. There's 90 billion neurons. You haven't got enough connections there. And now it's the other way around. I walk into a neuroscience, and they're showing a little computational, that slide that I showed you. And so, well, this is a simplification of how a neuron, they're using it to explain how neuroscience works. Yes, Linda says, why doesn't ChatGPT do a Google search first? Exactly. So a lot of these things, even in the olden days, when I did telephone digit speech recognition, we know there's certain patterns of telephone digits that are impossible. They just don't fit the format. And so if the recognizer comes up with that answer, you delete it and just go on to the next result. And this goes back to product engineering, which is a lot of opportunities. OpenAI is giving you a raw tool, but you can put stuff around it to fix it. And if you actually look at the Microsoft implementation, they're doing a bit more integration with Bing and ChatGPT, where it is actually fixed, and they're looking at reasons, they pull out reasons from the search engine of why the answer is there. You should expect much more on that, because that's an obvious hack. You don't need to know anything about how ChatGPT works or AI works. You can just do a combination of the system. Let's see. Great, excellent question, Mary. Where between the range of a basic program, assembly language program, assembly language is really hardly anyone writes in assembly anymore, but where does the prompt engineer? So this is a good question. Which is the most popular programming language? Is it C? Is it R? Is it Python? Right now, it's English. English is the most popular programming language. And this is the big inflection point. In the olden days, you had to actually learn assembly, learn C, learn Python. It actually got easier and easier as you moved along, as time went on. You didn't have to do the memory management in Python. But now it's English, and people say, well, I can do that. I can do that. But of course, there is a skill in doing that, being able to do these things. So it'll be important to look at. So you're going to get a prompt engineering is actually now almost a skill, a profession. Cynics might say, well, that's just being like librarians. In the olden days, you go to the library and they'd go into an online system and they'd help you do the search, and they'd be trained to do that. Let's see. Did you ever work or meet with John McCarthy, one of the founders of AI and Lisp? Recognized? I did not meet with John. Of course, I know of him, and that's probably actually one of the lessons for your children. I mean, there's so many brilliant people, and sometimes they're brilliant, but you may not realize they're brilliant. Sometimes they're brilliant and everybody realizes they're brilliant. But at Stanford, there's so many interesting and brilliant people. We tend to take it for granted. And I can remember, going to a class, the physics of energy, taught by a Nobel Prize winner. 160 kids showed up the first lesson. The second lesson, only 6 showed up, and I'm one of them. And third lesson, 5 show up. And fourth lesson, 6 show up. And then, but no one's actually dropped the class. No one's actually dropped it. There's still 160 people registered. And so in that particular case, the requirement for the class, you have to write a paper. The paper has nothing to do with the professor's lectures. It's completely orthogonal. So 95% of the students decided not to go to class and just do the work afterwards orthogonally. And that's probably a wasted opportunity. So when you ask your kids what classes they take and do they show up, someone said, well, you mean I get to spend 4 hours with the Nobel laureate with just 5 of us as a person? No, there's a great opportunity, but often people will dismiss what the opportunities are. So take advantage. You're only there for 4 years, 2 years, depending what degree you're on. Let's see.
Ronjon, there are a bunch of questions on regulation. Can you address that? What kind of regulation do you see?
Yeah, combine all of them together. Basically, you've got to, first of all, I think a lot of these regulators have no clue what AI is, right? They didn't take the course that Susan take or an equivalent course. And it's not that hard. You know, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 lectures and you get the idea. If you just, when I see a lot of things in the regulatory space, it's sort of black box type of thing. And they say, we don't understand how it works. But we actually do understand how it works. You can just unwrap the 1.7 trillion parameters. It's not my fault your brain can't assimilate 1.7 trillion parameters. But no, we're trying to solve difficult problems. It's not going to be a 3-parameter formula. And so once you know that, but it's math, right? What is the implication? What is the provenance of the data? These are like basic concepts, but you probably can't learn it from scratch. You probably have to take some kind of course about doing some of these things and knowing what's possible.
Also, Ronjon, if I was a student at Stanford, where would I start? If I wanted to do a startup, what would I need to do and how?
Yeah, so on a macro level, get educated and don't drop out. I know people say, well, Mark dropped out, Mark Zuckerberg and Larry and Sergey dropped out, and but usually no, after those 4 or 5 people, I know a number of people sitting under a bridge in San Francisco that not in that category, and so and we're all going to live till 120. Your kids will live to 120. Maybe our generation we're on the borderline, but our kids will live to 120 easily, and so they have time. Our generation, we had to rush everything, right? Rush everything. Get your degree done in 3 years, not 4 years. PhD in 3.5 years instead of 5 years. Master degree 1 year instead of 2 years. Rush everything and get in the world. So I think there's 5,000 courses to choose from. But it's doing the courses, your extracurricular activity, meeting co-founders in the dorm, meeting people you have a sort of a relationship with, and that's students, teachers, staff, and it's a unique environment. A university is a unique environment to do that, and you have a specialism on every topic. So AI is a tool, but typically you're applying AI to a topic. So if you're applying it to biology, you need to talk to biologists. If you're applying it for a material science issue, you need to take a special. I would take there's a number of basic AI classes where it depends where you're at. There's others that if you want to go deeper, there's firmly in the computer science department. And then you have to take classes in your specialism. Is it astrophysics? Is it material science? Is it biology? Is it economics? Are you trying to do a stock market prediction thing? So you have to divide your interest into those particular areas. And then I always leave a room for serendipity. You just try something. You're not doing anything between 3 and 4:30. What's there? Oh, volcanoes and earthquakes. Let's go and show up to that class. And a lot of these classes you can audit if they've run out of credits. You can audit and do other things.
Right. So last question, Ronjon. There's been questions on how should students be using AI? Can they use it for their own research papers, essays? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so different universities, different departments, different professors grappling and struggling with this problem. I've heard some universities saying they've banned it, they've put a blocker on the internal intranet. Other universities have said you must use ChatGPT. I think Wharton said that you have to use it because they want their students to be, and I think we're moving more towards that trend. In the olden days of pocket calculators, when they just came out, they said you can't use it, and then they said, okay, you must use it. What's going to happen is the questions are going to get harder. As teachers, we're going to say, well, I can actually ask a difficult question now because I know they can just use these tools to accelerate their material, their research. I don't have to actually simplify it as much. I'm going to expect more out from them. And so I think the trend is that we're going to allow students to use these tools. We may ask these students initially, that's my prediction, so declare that you use it. I think in a couple of 2 or 3 years time, you won't even have to do that. We just assume you're using it. And but you still have to look like it's written correctly and read correctly. Because ChatGPT derived essays are quite clear that they're written by a machine. They're too long, too verbose, etc.
Thank you, Ronjon. That was an amazing, very insightful talk. I just cannot wait to see how AI is going to make our lives easier as we go forward. And by the way, you just earned yourself 2 bottles of our famous Stanford Parents Club jam, which I will deliver to you shortly. But thank you once again for your time, and we really appreciate you coming on.
I'll put my email.
I also just want to extend a thanks to Ronjon too. And Ronjon, can you just for 1 second, I don't know if you can put your class list back up there.
Okay, yes.
I just want to plug Ronjon's classes. I've taken 2 of his neural networks classes, and I don't have a computer science background, and it's designed for people like me and people who do have a computer science background, and it's so informative and it's really eye-opening. And so for parents who are interested in getting involved in this field or investing in this field, or want to just stay up with the times, I highly recommend it. So the class that I took, he now calls Tech 152 a crash course in AI, which starts, and this is through the continuing education. Ronjon, are you still doing it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know. It probably costs what, $300 or $400 to take it?
Yeah.
It's worth every penny. So just want to give that a plug. Thank you. And I'm so excited to hear about Robbie. Robbie, you introduced to our class, the student who did the art back 5 years ago, that he actually, wow, I'm just thrilled.
Yeah, Robbie's. Yes, I thought he might have been in your class. That's
He
right. And he was
was.
only
Wow.
17 years old.
Yeah, he
at
was
the time.
17 and he was not going to go to college right away, and a very different background, and so brilliant. Wow. So that's nice. I'm glad that he got something out of what he was doing. Thanks again.
All right. Okay. I'll say bye and I'll put my email if anyone wants to contact me. All right.
Thank you, Ronjon.
Take care.